Okay, hello. I am back, and I probably should have waited to do this, but I was on a roll. I got a few chips and some water. Try to reset my throat a little, but I'm still a little dry and scratchy from the last one. But I want to just continue and keep cranking this out for now. So I apologize for that, but let's see if we can get one going here. So here's the circle game, video 3. And here I'm talking about the universal game system that's based off the circle videos that I put up, or the circle that I made. And we talked about the elements in the previous videos. We talked about these elements, which we copied over from the circle, and how they represent the magic. And we put in some other elements around here. And then in the last video, we talked about the classes and species, and kind of where they came about, and how they eventually settled into place. I didn't go into it 100%, but I gave a pretty good overview on warriors connecting to like animals, mages connecting to the technology or the ability to control the subatomic and things like that, all the way down. The jack of all trades class and species, the ones that could shapeshift and be kind of like do a little bit of everything, ranged, melee, whatever. The guardians, which were your heavy tanks, and you're not as much about of attack, but pure defenders. Your rogue, which is like your smaller warrior, or you're starting to get to a speed class, or a thief, or a stealth class. Things that become completely tactical, and they're not necessarily even engaged in battle per se, but they're more like a tactician. The mystics, which are kind of spiritual, or oracles, or seers, or witches and bards. They're getting to that mystic class. Priests. To your heavy wizards and magic users, like your wizards and warlocks. And then to your traditional magic users. And the species, again, from the robots, the totally mechanical, material-based thing, to your shape-shifting things that control materials, plants, animals, humans, aliens, your vampires, your supernatural stuff, and your gods. So at this point, we've got magic. We've got what are you? We've got what do you do? Well, what's your fighting class, or what do you do? And so the next thing that I kind of developed was, well, for most games, D&D or role-playing games, you get some stats, whether it's strength or intelligence, stamina. You have to have some stats. And most games associate 1 or 2 or maybe 3 or 4 stats, or all your stats just in certain ratios, but they associate those stats to the different characters and classes somehow. Right? So I started to say, but what are your stats and where do they go? And the same way that in the last video I talked about how like warriors and mage were kind of my first thinking for just classes, because they're like the two opposite sword and magic user that you have. That kind of corresponds to strength and intelligence. So I knew intelligence had to be somewhere near mage, and strength had to be somewhere near warrior. Excuse me, or something like a warrior. And that's how I started thinking about it. Now, over time, I realized that the warrior being more the fighter, I thought he was more of other words that came up quickly were obviously agility or speed and things like that. And I thought to myself about the warrior, I said, well, warriors are more about stamina and agility, which is their fighting, attacking side, versus like the defenders, the guardians, they're more about just pure strength and stamina. Right? Warriors are quick and agile a bit too. But if you've got the strength characters, they're not necessarily fast. Some of them could just be strong and brutish, right? So okay, I had intelligence, strength to think about, stamina and agility to think about. Well, when I thought about stamina, strength, and agility, at one point I think I had stamina and strength switched, But over time, I thought strength was most connected to chemistry and the earth. And I thought like, oh, just an earth being, of some sort is really strong. That's grounded. That's where all your strength comes from. The solid material that makes it strong. It's not energy. It's not airy. It's strength. It's material. So I ended up putting strength over here. And I thought from that chart where I say, eventually we'll get into this, like where movement comes from, coming from taking something solid and heating it up and you get movement. I knew that things like agility had to be more on the movement side. It's not like a big heavy strength thing that sits there. That's a moving thing. Flow like the water, be the water, Bruce Lee. That's agile. So I knew agility made sense to be more near water. And it kind of went like, I eventually thought, well, strength was the heaviest. Stamina was like, not necessarily strong, but you could just last long at whatever you were doing. And that's the life force gives you the ability to have stamina. Whereas the earth gives you the ability to have strength, right? And the water gives you the ability to have agility and move. And the air was your intelligence, because that's a traditional connection to what air means in systems. It made sense to put those four that way: intelligence, strength, stamina, agility. And so then I thought, well, what words do I usually see or hear when it comes to character stats, or what was missing? And spirit kept coming to mind. So that was a word I thought I might use, or was a big candidate for something that chunked out a large part of the circle that would have to go somewhere. Something that uses spirit, And let's see. These other three, and I'm going to talk about where they go a little bit more, but the other three here, which one do I want to tackle first? I guess this one down here, there was a lot of words that kept coming up for something about, between agility and spirit. Like, what does it mean to be agile of spirit? And if you think about the human side of things here on the chart, I kept getting words like charm, because rogues would, are charming, or thieves had charm, or stealth, things like that. I had changed those words over time. But on one of the recent incarnations, I liked the word poise. It's kind of like balance. I originally had a word balance up here, but I thought it wasn't quite right, or it was too general or something for the things that could do everything. Omni, they were just balanced. And I thought balance, but then it didn't quite sit right between intelligence and strength, although to have both is to be balanced. So I had the word balance up here, and it was like in the theme of going from heavier to lighter, strength, stamina, agility. But we started to get into the social sector of things, and there was also characters over here, which, I thought of like, where's a spy go? And diplomatic type characters, and assassins, and things like that. And so I thought poise captured some of the human side of it, the social, so I liked that as a stat. So I eventually settled on the word poise for the stat that affects like rogues and tacticians and aliens and humans and stuff over in this area, as how much poise do you have. So now we have intelligence, strength, stamina, agility, poise. So then I knew spirit, and when I thought of spirit, I did connect it to like the mountains. You go up in the mountains to find your spirit, and it's all about the fire and the spirits in the fire. And now you're getting back towards like mystics, and supernatural stuff is all about the spirits and ghosts. And so I thought spirit made sense, that, and Jedis, they work off the force, their spirit. The psionics and the oracles, the mentalists, like the seers of that sort, they're all it's all spirit based. And what's spirit? What's the fire? Again, wine and alcohol and oil start coming this way, and that's like the spirits. So I thought the spirit was good for this area. So then that just leaves wisdom and flux. And wisdom came out because I thought wizards were wise. And wizards and warlocks had to go over here by sorcerers. And I always thought there was this kind of difference between wisdom and intelligence, right? Word-wise, if you think about it. Intelligence is like more like knowledge and smarts, versus wisdom's like knowing how to apply it. Or intelligence is like the immediate facts, while wisdom is like the long-term, sitting on those facts or something. And wizards are old, but mages can be any age in a sense. And so it seemed that wisdom was good for this area here. it's also more symbolic, and you're wise with all the symbols. Whereas if you think about this chart here, the original one, the wizard knows all the symbols and the glyphs, whereas the magician or the mage knows all the spells, the language and math, but he's casting spells in language and math in a sense to control the quantum mechanical or something, if you think about it that way, or his body is, or whatever. But so wisdom ended up here. And like I said on this, I'm checking my time. Okay, we're good. 10 minutes and so in. This last one, I at one point had the word balance up here as the stat. But I realized that it wasn't the balance as much in this section that of the creatures who could shift or do everything or just be kind of jack of all trades. Yes, they have balance. Or what we were really balancing was all of the stats. This is kind of like the omni area because it controls all the subatomic and the atomic, and it can control everything from that element or from that sense of things. But it wasn't as much as those things being balanced or having a little bit of all, or kind of how I was tying that into the word balance. It was more the ability to change through all those things. And flux is a word that's physics-based or metallurgical-based. And, metallurgy, it means the material that they use flux with. And in physics, it's a rate of change of volume through a surface area or something over time, And so, and that's the physics area. And it's the ability to change. That's that alchemical side of getting into all of, like, you control all the quantum and the atomic, and you have that ability to flux through it. And, going between strength and intelligence, it kind of made sense to me to fit there. It fit better as a bridge between those two. So there you go. So there's the stats that I associate with each of the 8 parts of the circle. And I think we have some time here. We got about 8 minutes or so, or 10 minutes if I want to keep it around 20, to go into the land, which I think that's enough time to do that. So, okay. So now, I don't have it pulled up right here. I'll pull it up for another video. But when I started developing the game, I wanted to build a game using my system. I said, okay, I'm going to make a game based off this system. And I made a board game. And I wanted it to be a hybrid board game that was kind of a gamer's game. Something that was a combination of all the types of games that I like to play. So I tried to build this board game that was actually a combination of like a paper D&D game, a board game, a card game, a dice game, a chip game, and maybe chess or something else, if you think about it like that. And I said, let me just, the same way I'm doing this with this omni-poly thing for the circle and trying to make it a little bit of everything, I said, well, I'm going to take all the kind of games I've ever liked and make it, as much as I can, a hybrid type game. Ultimately, it would still be considered a board game, but this board game is a hybrid board game, if you will, that I based off of this circle. I'd love to make a video game off of it too or something, but so when I made that game, I designed a world, a geographical map where all this thing could take place on, this realm. I didn't name it. It's like the circle realm or whatever. I didn't actually have a name for it yet. Or I think I did eventually, Omni something or other, Omnitopia or whatever I called it. Or Omnitropolis. I think I eventually called it Omnitropolis. This is some of my newer stuff, and I hadn't thought about it for a little bit. But okay, anyway, this world that I created had 8 sectors to match the 8 sections here, and the same way I had applied all these other topics of elements and things to it at this point, I said to myself, well, it's a world. What kind of geology does it have, and what kind of geography does it have, and what are its land masses, and what do they look like, and all that. And I said, well, I guess I have to break that down into 8 too, and have 8 different types of, how do we break all the types of geography and geology that you could have in the world into 8 groups? And so I set myself on that task. And so I started thinking of the world. I said, well, there's mountains and plains and rivers and lakes and trees and hills and islands. And, you can see the words on here, obviously. And I started saying, well, where do they go? And sure enough, this is why I just find the system so interesting that it kind of just all falls into place over and over again. At that point, it started making so much sense, and it just fell into place. It was like, oh, this feels so natural. Because and I mean that literally. It's based off of the natural world and the natural systems of things. So hills are green usually. I mean, you can have brown hills and desert hills and everything hills. But I thought of hills representing the earth. It was either hills or mountains had to be the earth. That's like your dirt. Hills are the dirt. Mountains can be more rocks. But I thought of, okay, the earth is the first one that most associates to me was kind of hills. And it was green. And that's chemistry, is green. And the hills are green. And I thought, oh, that fits pretty good. And hills are strength and they're strong. You're in the hills and, strong plants and stuff. It's in the hills. It's great. I thought that feels pretty good to be earth is hills. Sure. Right? That made sense. And so I said, okay. And let's say, I know this is going to go over now because I wasn't prepared to do this. I'm doing it on the fly, so I'm having to get myself back into the logic each time as I talk about it. But maybe do I want to cut this one off here and just start another video for we'll pick up there from the land. I think I'm going to, because I don't want to do this in 2 or 3 minutes. I know I could talk about this for more. And that might be good just to make another final video for the night. Maybe that'll be a short one. Or I don't know where I'll go from there. But that'll give me a chance just to, just ramble on and talk about whatever comes to mind. I'm kind of doing this stream of consciousness, just, flowing. So let's do that. Let's stop here, and I'll make another one of these. And then we'll talk about the lands and how they were associated. You can start to figure it out for yourself and look at it and see if you feel like it fits. But I'm going to leave that here for now. I'll probably make the next video right now, and I'll just post all these at once. But I hope you enjoyed that. So now we've talked about more of the circle game and the stats and why and where they are and how this universal system kind of represents your game world. And then eventually, maybe I'll show some of the game or talk about how I started to try to implement it and whatnot. And I have this other chart too here that I have. I have a few others, but this is another one that I use. That eventually will show you where all these other aspects of that board game and how it works, or how you control different parts of that system. But for now, we're going to leave it at that. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have questions, leave them in the comments. I'll try to get to it if I can, if I see it. And thanks for watching. Oops.